The playground was empty, except for the sound of Joon's laughter echoing across the swings. Tae-Shin pushed him higher, his hands trembling slightly each time the small body arced backward into the sky. 6 weeks had passed since that day at the coastal town. 6 weeks of supervised visits that felt like walking on glass. Every moment was precious. Every moment was terrifying. "Higher, Dad. Higher." Joon's voice cracked with joy, and Tae-Shin felt his chest constrict. "Dad." The words still felt unearned, a gift he didn't deserve but couldn't bring himself to refuse. Amina watched from a bench 20 feet away, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She never left them alone, never let her guard completely down. Tae-Shin understood. Trust wasn't rebuilt in weeks, it was reconstructed brick by brick, promise by promise, and he had broken so many promises before. The swing began to slow and Joon jumped off mid-arc, landing in a crouch that would have given Amina a heart attack if she'd been paying closer attention. Instead, she was staring at her phone, her face slowly draining of color. "Joon, come here," she called, her voice suddenly tight. Tae-Shin noticed the shift immediately. Years of reading danger in a room made him hyper-aware of changes in tone, posture, breathing. Something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked, approaching the bench. Amina stood abruptly, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Nothing. We need to go. Mom, we just got here," Joon protested, running over with grass stains on his knees. I said now. Her voice had an edge that made even Tae-Shin step back. She grabbed Joon's hand, already pulling him toward the parking lot. Tae-Shin followed. "Amina, what happened?" She spun on him, and for a moment he saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger, not resentment, fear. "A hospital in Seoul called," she said quietly, glancing down to make sure Joon was distracted by a beetle crawling across the pavement. "They're asking about Joon's medical history, asking if there's anything I haven't disclosed." "Why would they?" "I don't know." She cut him off, her jaw tight. "But something's wrong." The beetle flew away, and Joon looked up, confused by the tension crackling between the adults. Tae-Shin wanted to reach out, to offer reassurance, but Amina was already moving, already pulling their son toward safety she couldn't define. 3 days later, Tae-Shin sat in a sterile waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Amina hadn't called him. He'd found out from the school secretary that Joon had collapsed during recess, that an ambulance had taken him to Seoul National University Hospital. He'd driven 4 hours without stopping, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind racing through every worst-case scenario. When he burst through the emergency room doors, Amina was standing in the hallway outside a restricted area, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her ribs together. "Where is he?" Tae-Shin demanded. She looked up, and he saw that she'd been crying. Amina never cried, even when he'd destroyed their marriage, even when she'd packed their lives into boxes and disappeared. She'd been composed, controlled. Seeing tears on her face now made his blood run cold. "They're running tests," she said hoarsely. He was playing, and then he couldn't breathe. He turned gray, Tae-Shin. His lips turned blue. A doctor emerged before Tae-Shin could respond. A young woman with tired eyes and a clipboard clutched against her chest. "Mrs. Kang? What's wrong with my son?" Amina stepped forward, her voice breaking. The doctor glanced at Tae-Shin. "Are you the father?" "Yes." The lie came automatically, instinctively. He'd been signing permission slips, sending birthday cards, showing up to every soccer practice Amina allowed. Biology felt irrelevant. "We found a congenital heart defect," the doctor said, her clinical tone doing nothing to soften the blow. "Tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary stenosis. It's rare, often asymptomatic in early childhood, but it's progressed to a critical stage. He needs surgery. Soon." Amina's knees buckled. Tae-Shin caught her before she hit the floor, his arm around her waist, holding her upright even as his own world tilted sideways. "How soon?" he asked. "Within the next 3 months. Maybe sooner if his condition deteriorates. What are his chances?" The doctor hesitated, and that pause said more than words could. With the right surgical team, the survival rate is good, but there are risks. His anatomy is complicated. We'd need a specialist, someone experienced with pediatric cardiac malformations. I'll pay for it. Tae-Shin's voice was steady now, certain. Whatever it costs, the best surgeon, the best facility, private room, round-the-clock care. Whatever he needs. Amina pulled away from him, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We don't need your money. Amina, I said no. She turned to the doctor. What are our options through the national health system? The doctor's expression softened with sympathy. The wait list is long, and honestly, for a case this complex, I'd recommend going private if you have the means. Tae-Shin wanted to scream. Pride was going to kill their son, and Amina couldn't see past her hatred of what his money represented. He'd earned it through blood and violence, through deals that kept him awake at night, through a life he'd already abandoned. But it was still money. It could still save Joon. Can I see him? Amina asked. Of course. He's sedated right now, but you can sit with him. Amina walked away without looking back. Tae-Shin stood in the hallway, useless and furious, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The doctor touched his arm gently. Mr. Kang, can I speak with you privately? He followed her into a small consultation room, his mind still on Joon's blue lips, on the image of his son struggling to breathe. There's something else, the doctor said, closing the door. When we ran the preliminary blood work, we noticed some irregularities in Joon's genetic markers. What kind of irregularities? She sat down, her expression carefully neutral. This is delicate, and I want to be sensitive to your family's situation. But given the complexity of his condition and the need for potential donors, we ran a standard paternity screen as part of the genetic workup. Tae-Shin's stomach dropped. Why would you do that without asking? It's protocol for cases where we might need bone marrow or organ donation from family members. We need to establish biological compatibility. She paused. Mr. Kang, are you sure you're Joon's biological father? The question hung in the air like smoke. Tae-Shin sat down slowly, his mind racing. Of course he was. He'd been there when Amina got pregnant. He'd watched her belly swell. He'd held Joon minutes after his birth. There had been no question, no doubt. Yes, he said. Why? The doctor slid a paper across the desk. Numbers and graphs he didn't understand filled the page, but at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, was a single line. Probability of paternity, 0.0000%. This can't be right, Tae-Shin said, his voice hollow. Run it again. We did. 3 times. Mr. Kang, I'm sorry, but you're not Joon's biological father. The room felt like it was shrinking. Tae-Shin stared at the paper, at the numbers that were destroying everything he thought he knew. Amina had never mentioned anyone else. There had been no affairs, no separation before Joon was born. They'd been married, living together, trying to make it work despite Tae-Shin's absences and lies. Unless she'd hidden it. Unless there was another secret buried beneath all the others. Does she know? He asked quietly. I haven't told her yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Don't. The word came out sharper than he intended. Don't tell her. Not yet. The doctor frowned. Mr. Kang, this information is medically relevant. I said not yet. He stood, his chair scraping against the linoleum. I need to think. He left the hospital in a daze, drove to a parking garage, and sat in his car for 3 hours as the sun set and the city lights flickered to life. His phone rang 14 times. Text messages piled up. He ignored all of them. The boy he'd loved for 7 years wasn't his. The marriage he'd destroyed had been built on a lie he didn't even know existed. And Amina, the woman he'd spent 6 weeks trying to prove himself to, had kept a secret that made all his sins seem trivial by comparison. When he finally returned to the hospital, it was past midnight. Amina was asleep in a chair beside Joon's bed, her hand resting on their son's chest, rising and falling with each breath the machines helped regulate. Tae-Shin stood in the doorway and watched them, 2 people who shared blood he'd never be part of, and felt something inside him crack wide open. Joon's eyes fluttered open. Dad? The word was a knife. Tae-Shin stepped into the room, forcing a smile. "Hey, buddy. How are you feeling?" "Tired." Joon's voice was weak, hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed hours earlier. "Mom said I have a broken heart." "It's not broken," Tae-Shin said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Just a little mixed up, but we're going to fix it. Are you going to stay, this time?" The question destroyed him. Tae-Shin looked at Amina, still sleeping, exhausted from fear and vigilance. He looked at Joon, small and fragile against white sheets, his dark eyes trusting in a way Tae-Shin had never earned. "Yes," he lied. "I'm going to stay." But even as he said it, he was planning his exit. He'd pay for the surgery, transfer funds into Amina's account anonymously, make sure Joon had everything he needed. Then he'd disappear. He wasn't the father. He had no right to be here, no claim to this family built on secrets and biology he couldn't change. Joon fell back asleep, holding Tae-Shin's hand. When Amina woke an hour later, she found him still sitting there, silent tears streaming down his face. "Tae-Shin?" She stood, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." He wiped his eyes quickly. "Just tired." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, accepting the lie the way she'd accepted so many others over the years, and Tae-Shin hated her for it, hated himself more. The next morning, he met with the hospital's financial department and arranged for full payment of Joon's surgery. $2 million transferred from accounts he'd liquidated overnight, assets sold at a loss because time mattered more than money. He hired the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in Asia, a woman from Singapore who'd performed this operation 43 times without a single fatality. Then he went home to the apartment he'd rented near the hospital and poured himself a drink he didn't finish. The DNA results sat on his kitchen table, a bomb waiting to explode. His phone rang. "Amina, the hospital says you paid for everything," she said without preamble. "I told you not to." "Sue me." "Tae-Shin." "He's getting the surgery, Amina, with the best surgeon money can buy. You can be angry about it later." A long pause. Then quietly, "Thank you." He hung up before she could say anything else, before he could ask the questions burning holes in his chest. Who was Joon's father? Did she know? Had she lied deliberately, or was this some nightmare neither of them saw coming? 3 days later, a package arrived. Medical records, genetic reports, a handwritten note from the doctor. "Mr. Kang, I thought you should have the complete file. I'm sorry for what you're going through." Tae-Shin spread the documents across his table and began to read. Blood type analysis, genetic markers, chromosomal mapping, all the clinical evidence of a truth he didn't want to accept. Then he found the old file, attached at the back. A police report from 8 years ago, barely 3 pages, stamped case closed. Home invasion. Assault. Victim, Kang Amina. Suspect, unknown. His hands started shaking. He read the date, calculated backward. 40 weeks before Joon's birth. The glass he'd been holding slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. Tae-Shin stood there, surrounded by broken shards and the ruins of everything he thought he understood, and finally grasped the truth. Amina hadn't lied. She'd been protecting him. The memory came back in fragments, sharp and terrible. He'd been away that week, finalizing a deal that went south. His rivals had sent men to their home, not to rob but to send a message. Amina had been alone. She'd called him once, her voice shaking, said she was fine, that nothing happened. He'd believed her because it was easier than facing what his choices had cost. Now he understood. She'd carried this alone. The violation, the pregnancy, the knowledge that her son was conceived in violence meant to destroy her husband. She'd never told him because telling him would have meant watching him burn the world down, would have meant more violence, more death, more of the life she was trying to escape. So she'd run instead. Taken Joon and disappeared, let Tae-Shin believe it was about his neglect, about his lies. Let him think he could earn his way back. And he'd shown up in her new life with flowers and promises, completely oblivious to the depth of her sacrifice. Tae-Shin sat on his kitchen floor among the broken glass and wept. When he could breathe again, he called the hospital. "I need to see Dr. Kim," he said. "Tell her I need to donate for Joon's surgery." The nurse sounded confused. Sir, the surgery's already funded. Not money, tissue, heart tissue, whatever he needs. A pause. Mr. Kang, you're not a biological match. The test showed. Run them again. I don't care what they showed. Run every test you have. I'm his father. But biology didn't care about love. The tests came back the same. Incompatible. Useless. Tae-Shin stood in the hospital lab and watched the technician shake her head and felt his last chance to matter slipping away. The surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Tae-Shin spent 48 hours walking the city, trying to figure out what to do. He could confront Amina, force her to explain, demand answers to questions that would only hurt them both. Or he could disappear, let her raise Joon without the complication of a man who wasn't even his real father. But Monday night, as he sat in his apartment staring at a half-packed suitcase, his phone buzzed. Emergency. Joon's condition critical. Surgery moved to tonight. He was in his car before the message finished loading, speeding through red lights, his heart hammering against his ribs. Not biology, not blood, just the terrible, overwhelming need to make sure his son survived. When he reached the hospital, chaos. Nurses running, machines beeping, Amina standing outside the surgical wing looking small and lost. What happened? Tae-Shin grabbed her shoulders. He coded, she said, her voice distant, shock setting in. His heart just stopped. They got him back, but they have to operate now. They can't wait. Where is he? They're prepping him. She looked up at Tae-Shin, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. You came. Of course I came. You always leave. Every time it matters, you leave. Not this time. He pulled her against his chest, felt her resistance crumble. Not ever again. A nurse approached with a clipboard. We need a signature. Consent for emergency surgery. Amina reached for the pen, but her hand was shaking too badly to write. Tae-Shin took it from her, signed his name in bold strokes across the line labeled Legal Guardian. The nurse glanced at the paperwork, at Amina, then back to Tae-Shin. Are you sure you have the authority? I'm his father, Tae-Shin said firmly. That's all the authority I need. The surgery took 9 hours. Tae-Shin and Amina sat in the waiting room without speaking, the silence between them heavy with everything they'd never said. Around hour 6, Amina finally broke. You know, don't you? He looked at her. Know what? About Joon. About... She couldn't finish the sentence. Yes. How long? A few days. The doctor told me when they ran the genetic workup. Amina's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I just couldn't. You were protecting me. Tae-Shin turned to face her fully. You were protecting both of us, and you shouldn't have had to. It was supposed to be a message, she said quietly, the story spilling out after years of silence. They wanted to hurt you by hurting me. I fought them, but there were 3 of them, and I was alone. When I realized I was pregnant, I thought about ending it, but I couldn't. He was innocent. So you ran. I couldn't look at you every day knowing what your life had cost us, knowing that Joon existed because of violence you'd brought into our home. Tae-Shin felt his throat tighten. You should have let me kill them. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. Amina wiped her eyes. You would have turned into a monster. You would have proved them right. They sat in silence again, processing 8 years of choices and consequences. I don't care, Tae-Shin said finally. What? About the DNA. About who his biological father is. I was there when he was born. I taught him to ride a bike. I know his favorite dinosaur is a Pachycephalosaurus because he likes saying the word. He's my son, Amina. Blood didn't make me his father. Love did. She stared at him, and for the first time in years Tae-Shin saw something like hope in her eyes. The surgeon emerged just before dawn, exhausted but smiling. He made it. The surgery was successful. He's in recovery now. Amina collapsed against Tae-Shin, sobbing with relief. He held her, his own tears soaking into her hair, and felt something broken inside him start to heal. But when the surgeon pulled him aside an hour later, her expression was grave. Mr. Kang, there's a complication. His blood went cold. What kind of complication? During the surgery, we had to perform an emergency transfusion. Your son has a rare blood type and we were running low. I understand you attempted to donate earlier. You said I wasn't compatible, not for tissue matching, but for blood. She paused. When we ran the cross-match, we found an irregularity. You have a heart condition, Mr. Kang, similar to Joon's but more advanced. You're in the early stages of cardiac failure. The world tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying you need surgery yourself, soon, and given your lifestyle, the stress you've been under. She looked at him sympathetically. You're a ticking time bomb. Tae-Shin thought about the chest pains he'd been ignoring for months, the shortness of breath he'd blamed on stress, the nights he'd woken up gasping. He'd been dying slowly, and he hadn't even noticed. Don't tell Amina, he said. Mr. Kang, I need to be there for Joon. When he wakes up, don't take that from me. The surgeon hesitated, then nodded. You have a few weeks, maybe a month, but after that, I know. He went back to the waiting room, where Amina was sleeping fitfully in a chair. He watched her breathe, watched the sunrise paint her face gold, and made a decision. Joon woke up 3 days later, groggy and disoriented. Tae-Shin was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. Dad? The word was slurred from painkillers. I'm here. Did they fix my heart? Yeah, buddy. They fixed it. Are you going to leave again? Tae-Shin looked at Amina, standing in the doorway. Their eyes met, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. No, he said. I'm going to stay. But staying meant confronting everything they'd buried. That night, after Joon fell asleep, Tae-Shin and Amina sat in the hospital cafeteria over cold coffee and had the conversation they should have had years ago. I was a terrible husband, Tae-Shin began. Yes, I put my pride before your safety, my ambition before your happiness. Yes, I can't change any of that, but I can do better now. Amina stirred her coffee, not drinking it. What if better isn't enough? Then I'll do extraordinary. I'll do whatever it takes. You're going to die, aren't you? She said it quietly, without accusation. I heard the surgeon talking to the nurses. You have the same condition as Joon. He should have known she'd figure it out. Amina had always been smarter than him. Yeah. How long? Not long enough. She reached across the table and took his hand. Then don't waste it lying to me. Not anymore. So he told her everything, about the deals he'd made, the people he'd hurt, the man he'd been before he understood what fatherhood meant, about the night he'd found out about Joon's paternity, about the moment he'd chosen to stay anyway, about the love he'd discovered too late to do much good. And Amina listened, her hand steady in his, her eyes clear. You know what the worst part is? She said when he finished. I still love you. After everything, I still love you. And I hate myself for it. Don't. Tae-Shin squeezed her hand. Love isn't weakness. It's the only thing that matters. Outside Joon's room, they could hear him talking in his sleep, muttering about dinosaurs and soccer balls. The sound made them both smile. He heard us earlier, Amina said. When you were talking to the doctor. He knows you're sick. What did he say? He said you're his dad, and dads don't give up. Tae-Shin felt his chest tighten, pain that had nothing to do with his failing heart. Smart kid. He gets it from me. They sat together in silence, two broken people trying to figure out how to be whole for the child who needed them. And in that silence, something shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding, acceptance. Over the following weeks, as Joon recovered, Tae-Shin made arrangements. He sold everything, the properties, the businesses, the remnants of his old life. He severed ties with everyone from his past, paid off debts, settled scores. He became invisible, just another man walking through the world. He also saw his own surgeon, who confirmed what he already knew. 6 months, maybe less. They could try surgery, but the risks were enormous and the outcome uncertain. I'll take my chances without it, Tae-Shin said. You have a son to think about. Exactly. which is why I'd rather spend my last months with him than unconscious in a hospital bed. The surgeon tried to argue, but Tae-Shin had made up his mind. Joon came home from the hospital with a scar down his chest and instructions to take it easy. He ignored the instructions immediately, running around the small apartment Amina had rented, driving her crazy with his energy. "He's going to hurt himself," she said, watching him jump from the couch to the armchair. "Let him live," Tae-Shin replied. "He's been through enough." That night, after Joon fell asleep, Tae-Shin found him standing beside the bed, just watching. The boy's chest rose and fell steadily. No machines, no monitors. Just the natural rhythm of a fixed heart. "I used to do this," Amina said, appearing beside him. "When he was a baby. I'd watch him sleep and wonder what kind of man he'd become. He'll be better than me. That's a low bar." Tae-Shin smiled. "He'll be better than both of us." But 2 weeks later, Joon overheard a conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. Tae-Shin was on the phone with his surgeon, discussing final arrangements. Joon was supposed to be at school, but he'd forgotten his math book and come back. He stood in the hallway and listened to his father plan his own death. That night at dinner, Joon was quiet. Too quiet. "What's wrong, buddy?" Tae-Shin asked. "Are you going to die?" The question hung in the air. Amina's fork clattered against her plate. Tae-Shin looked at his son, at the fear in his 7-year-old eyes, and couldn't bring himself to lie. "Yeah," he said softly. "Probably, but they can fix you, like they fixed me. It's more complicated than that. You're scared." Joon's voice was matter-of-fact, understanding beyond his years. "You're scared of the surgery." "Yes, but you made me do it. You said brave people do things even when they're scared." Tae-Shin felt his throat close up. Out of the mouths of children came the truths adults spent their lives avoiding. "You're right," he said. "I'm a hypocrite." Joon stood up from the table, walked around to Tae-Shin's chair, and climbed into his lap. "You have to try. Please, Dad. You have to try." Tae-Shin looked at Amina, saw tears streaming down her face. He wrapped his arms around Joon and buried his face in his son's hair. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Tae-Shin spent those weeks doing all the things he'd missed before, helping with homework, coaching soccer practice, building a blanket fort that took over the entire living room. He and Amina took Joon to the beach, where they built sandcastles and collected shells and pretended everything was normal. One evening, as they walked along the shore, Joon ran ahead, chasing waves. Amina slipped her hand into Tae-Shin's. "If you don't make it," she said quietly, "I need you to know something. Don't. Let me finish." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "You weren't the father Joon was born with, but you became the father he needed. And that matters more than any blood test ever could." Tae-Shin pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "If I don't make it, promise me you'll tell him the truth someday. About everything. He deserves to know. I promise." The night before the surgery, Tae-Shin couldn't sleep. He got up at 2 in the morning and found Joon awake too, sitting in the living room with a flashlight, looking at a photo album. "Hey buddy, what are you doing up?" "Looking at pictures." Joon patted the couch beside him. "Come sit." Tae-Shin sat, and Joon showed him the album. Pictures from when he was a baby, from birthday parties, from soccer games. In every photo, Tae-Shin was there, sometimes in the background, sometimes holding Joon, always present even when he hadn't been. "Mom kept all of these," Joon said, "even after we left. She said it was important to remember the good parts. Your mom is a smart woman, Dad." Joon looked up at him, serious. "Do you remember when I asked if you were my real father?" Tae-Shin's heart stopped. "Yes, I know the truth. I heard you and Mom talking." Of course he had. Kids always knew more than adults gave them credit for. "I'm sorry," Tae-Shin started, but Joon shook his head. "You're the only dad I remember. You're the only dad I want. I don't care about the rest." Tae-Shin pulled his son into his arms and held him while they both cried. The surgery took 11 hours. Amina sat in the waiting room with Joon, who refused to leave even when she tried to take him home. They played cards, read books, existed in the terrible limbo of not knowing. When the surgeon finally emerged, her expression was carefully neutral. He made it through the surgery, but the next 48 hours are critical. He's in the ICU. They weren't allowed to see him until the next morning. When they finally entered the room, Tae-Shin looked small and fragile, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped in rhythmic patterns. "Dad?" Joon whispered, taking his hand. Tae-Shin's eyes fluttered open. He looked at his son, at Amina standing behind him, and smiled weakly. "Hey, you made it. Told you. Dads don't give up." He stayed in the ICU for a week. Slowly, painfully, he improved. The machines came off one by one. Physical therapy began. And through it all, Joon and Amina were there, constant and unwavering. 3 months later, Tae-Shin was released from the hospital with strict instructions and a pile of medications. He moved back to the apartment with Amina and Joon, not as a husband but as a co-parent, rebuilding trust through consistency and presence. One Saturday morning, over breakfast, Joon asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "Are we a family again?" Amina and Tae-Shin exchanged glances. "That's complicated," Amina said carefully. "Why?" "Because family is more than just living together," Tae-Shin explained. "It's about commitment and trust and—" "Do you love each other?" Joon interrupted. Another glance. Amina answered first. "Yes, but love doesn't fix everything. Then fix the other stuff." Joon said it like it was simple, like adults were overcomplicating things as usual. "I almost died. You almost died. Life's too short to be stupid about it." From the mouths of children. Tae-Shin started laughing, and Amina joined him, and Joon looked pleased with himself for solving their problems so efficiently. But Joon was right. Life was too short. 6 months later, Tae-Shin legally adopted Joon. The ceremony was small, just the 3 of them and a judge who smiled when Joon insisted on signing the papers too, like his opinion mattered most. "This makes it official," the judge said, handing Tae-Shin the certificate. "Congratulations." Tae-Shin looked at the paper, at his name next to Joon's, and felt something settle in his chest. Not redemption exactly. He'd done too much damage for simple redemption, but perhaps a chance to be better, to build something good from the wreckage of who he'd been. That night, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream. Joon fell asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, his head on Tae-Shin's shoulder. Amina covered him with a blanket and sat on Tae-Shin's other side. "We should talk about the future," she said quietly. "What about it? You can't stay in Korea. Your past, there are still people who remember you, who have scores to settle." Tae-Shin had been thinking the same thing. "I know. I've been offered a position, teaching at a university in New Zealand. It's far, it's safe, it's perfect." He looked at her. "When do we leave? You'd come with us? Did you think I'd let you raise our son alone?" He emphasized the word "our," making it clear that biology didn't matter anymore. Amina smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. "Our son. I like the sound of that." They left Korea 3 months later, quietly and without fanfare. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. They simply disappeared. 3 people starting over in a country where no one knew their names or their history. Tae-Shin got a job teaching Taekwondo at a community center. Amina thrived at the university. Joon made friends, joined the soccer team, grew up healthy and strong. They rented a house near the ocean, where the sound of waves replaced the noise of the city they'd left behind. Years passed. Joon graduated high school with honors, got accepted to a good university. He wanted to be a doctor, he said. He wanted to fix people's heart. The graduation ceremony was outdoors on a bright December day. Amina and Tae-Shin sat in the audience, watching their son walk across the stage, and both felt the weight of how far they'd come. But as Joon accepted his diploma, Tae-Shin stood up and quietly walked away. He made it to the parking lot before Amina caught up with him. "Where are you going?" "He doesn't need me here," Tae-Shin said. "This is his day. I don't want to complicate it. Don't be ridiculous. He'd want you there. Would he?" Tae-Shin looked at her. Or would he just be too kind to say otherwise? Amina grabbed his arm. "Stop. You're his father. Not because of blood, not because of some legal document. Because you chose him every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I'm still the man who brought violence into your life, and you're also the man who left that life behind, who changed, who proved that people can be better than their worst mistakes. She pulled him back toward the ceremony. Now come on, our son is graduating and we're going to watch together. They made it back to their seats just as Joon found them in the crowd. He waved, grinning, his whole face lighting up. And in that moment, Tae-Shin understood what Amina had been trying to tell him. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a future worth living for. 5 years later, Joon finished medical school. The ceremony was bigger this time, more formal. Tae-Shin sat in the audience with Amina, now his wife. They'd remarried quietly 2 years earlier, and watched his son become Dr. Kang Joon. After the ceremony, they took photos together. 3 people who'd survived impossible odds, who'd built a family from broken pieces, who'd learned that love was stronger than blood, than violence, than any secret that tried to tear them apart. I'm proud of you, Tae-Shin told Joon later over dinner. I learned from the best, Joon replied, and Tae-Shin knew he wasn't talking about medical school. That night, as they walked along the beach near their home, Joon asked the question he'd been holding on to for years. Do you ever wonder about him? My biological father? Tae-Shin stopped walking. They'd never discussed it directly, not since that night when Joon was 7. Sometimes, I don't. Joon looked at him, his expression serious. You're my father, the only one that matters. Biology is just science, but being a dad, that's a choice. And you chose me, even when you didn't have to. That means everything. Tae-Shin felt his eyes burn with tears he didn't try to hide. I chose you because you made it easy. You're the best thing I ever did. We're the best thing you ever did, Amina corrected, joining them. All of us together. They stood on the beach as the sun set. 3 people who'd survived the worst and built something beautiful from the wreckage. And Tae-Shin understood, finally, that this was redemption. Not erasing the past, but refusing to let it define the future. He wasn't the father Joon was born with, but he'd become the father Joon chose. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Let us know. And don't forget to like this video. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, love is always a choice, not just a circumstance.